Oh, that's
Oh,
so
oh.
I could deny this.
I know, leave meeting.
Leave meeting. See ya.
Exactly. Now that I know your face is recorded, I don't ever want to see it recorded.
Well, yes, because I tell one of the recordings that we did, I said, oh my gosh, why was I up so close to the camera?
Just don't pick your nose, you're fine.
Right. Now we know, right? Now we
Hey,
know.
Melanie.
Good morning.
Ralph, that's funny, but
Oh, no.
wait, Keith was doing, I think it was last year, the year before, Keith and his team were doing we had dentists and stuff on, doing a whole presentation on something. And so everybody was joined in on Zoom, and there were some dentists and stuff on, and there was this woman like laying in bed, and then she proceeds to pick her nose, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. I was on the call and I was like, oh my God, I'm freaking out.
Wow.
Right.
Matt, I love your haircut.
Thank you.
I like it. It's nice.
Morning.
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 Hello.
Good morning, all.
Good
Morning,
morning.
Ralph.
I just want to make a comment. Those on the panel should show their faces.
Should or should not?
Should.
I think it's nice to see everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
So nice to see so many people joining this morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Mm.
Hey, where'd you guys get your cool backgrounds? Lois, Joanna, Scott, where'd you?
Don't tell her. Don't
Yeah.
tell her.
Sarah
Secret.
Tanner.
We
Sarah
cannot
Tanner
disclose
created them
until
for
the
us.
end.
Very nice.
I'm really impressed.
Isn't it great?
It really is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
We're taking branding to a whole new level, Lori.
I see that. It's really cool.
Picture's actually all of us on the panel, holding hands. We took a group picture.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
How are you?
Morning.
Morning.
I feel, well, I'm gonna date myself. I feel like the Waltons.
Except that would have been good night, John Boy.
Good
not
night,
good
John
morning.
Boy. Right, right.
I was afraid to say that because I was afraid 3/4 of the people were gonna be like, who the hell are the Waltons?
Oh, the Waltons are.
Who are the Waltons, Lori?
I don't know what that means because I knew who the Waltons are.
Really? That's the one you're trying to get over, Ralph? Okay, fine. All right.
So we're up to about 95 associates, and it is 9:02. So if you want to get started, Joanna and Ralph, feel free. If you want to wait another moment, that's fine as well.
We are ready. Joanna, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we're going to start our engines. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Ralph LPV Jr.
Good morning.
And I'm a manager in the Information Security Office led by Buda Almeida. I would like to thank you for your interest in this abbreviated panel to share a partial, again, I'm going to say a partial experience of the white men as full diversity partners. It was a summit that was held with Delta Dental of New Jersey and Connecticut. Yes, the title of the summit, White Men as Full Diversity Partners, definitely has a shock value. But you will find in this abbreviated experience that's going to be shared with you this morning that the summit did not just deal with white versus black or good versus evil, but focused on a culture that has existed in society that has crossed over into our organizational culture as far as in business. Not here at Delta Dental, of course, but into the business organizations of many companies. I have been fortunate to start my career in the financial sector on Wall Street, working across several domains of technology, which has afforded me the experience of unfortunate prejudice and bias based on non-professional measures. Therefore, I submit it is our experience that generates our sensitivity to the different stimuli that will be injected into our lives. Please keep an open mind and let's be respectful to one another due to everyone maybe not having the same experience to develop a sensitivity that we may share today. Joanna?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us. I'm Joanna Santos, and I've been with Delta Dental for over 8 years in the operations area, and prior to that with Medco Health. I too have experienced gender and racial bias. Being able to participate in the White Men as Full Diversity Partners, try saying that 5 times fast, was a very thought-provoking, insightful, and emotional experience for me. Overall, 75 participants were included in the initial workshops. The Leaders Lab workshop took place from March 29th through April 1st, and the Courageous Leaders Summit, April 22nd and 23rd. The labs were intended to create brave and meaningful dialogue across the divides of ethnicity, race, gender, and sexual orientation. The labs help the leaders grow, apply, and practice inclusive behaviors, as well as create inclusive culture to bring back to our work teams and our colleagues. Today, we will share with you a small glimpse of our experience. Throughout the discussion, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll address them at the end. And now back to Ralph to introduce our panelists.
Our panelists, we thank very much for taking part and working with us. On our panel today, we have Sandra Terrell, who is a manager in client services. We have Gio Gross, who is an account manager. We have Tori Joe, a manager in customer service. We have Ralph Saratino, Director of Quality Assurance. And we have Scott Klein, Assistant Vice President, Chief Audit and Risk Officer. We're getting ready to start our panel, but there was a technique that was shared in the summit that we thought was very effective. And at this point, we would like everyone, except for the panelists, to turn off your video. And this will allow us that when we ask the questions, we can see who will be available and responding to the questions that will be asked. So at this time, if you can turn off your videos and please make sure that you have muted your mics. So I'm going to begin the questions to our panelists now. When you first received your invitation to participate in the program facilitated by White Men as Full Diversity Partners, what was your reaction?
Ralph, I'm going to start the ball rolling here. as you said, there's shock value in that title. And for me, when I received the invitation, before I looked at all the materials that came with it, I thought to myself, white diversity and inclusion, how can white men speak about diversity and tell us anything? Because they're, my perception was they're not qualified. It was very much the opposites. We got so much perspective and so much dialogue amongst ourselves that it was a very pleasant surprise at how much value came out of it. And so my going in perception was way off base.
And I'll add on to what Ralph said. I mean, I agree 100% with what Ralph said. I mean, when this invitation came through, and with the title "White Men as Full Diversity Partners," really didn't know what to expect. We were asked to devote, I guess, almost 4 days to this training course. I was thinking, how can we talk about this for 4 days? Obviously, it's an important topic. There's a lot to it, but I just wonder what would the training entail. And as Ralph said, it was a total 180. Once the training started, once we went through it, there's a lot more to it that we discussed. Ralph, PV, as you discussed, it's not just black versus white. It's also, sexual orientation. It's also, gender and so forth. So it was it exceeded greatly what I expected for the training.
To Ralph and Scott, I would just maybe ask the question, do you think that through your experience that a level of sensitivity was developed?
I would say absolutely, yes. Again, the content and the conversation really brought to my attention some things I had experienced myself, but many
Yes.
things I had not. So hearing what others had to say definitely raised my level of awareness a whole bunch.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. I mean, going through one of the first couple things I thought about is like, how did this impact me? I mean, as a white person, it really, fortunately, unfortunately, really didn't have much go against me. But, it got me thinking of, a time when I was in my youth, when I worked at, McDonald's in my teen. I had a general manager who, was German, and that's important for the purpose of the story. And, me, I'm Jewish. And, goofing off as a teenager does, back in the grill area. And, he said, all right, I've had enough. And he opened up the oven and said, okay, get in the oven now.
Oh,
So that, I forgot about that, but I guess, this training brought that up and it brought a bunch of feelings up. And so that's what that was.
so I'll add, my reaction when I got the invite, and I think for a lot of us, we've been through a lot of diversity training over the years. And my first reaction was, is this going to be the same thing that we've been doing over and over? I have to say my experience going through it was very, very different. To Joanna's point, it was very emotional. We touched on, again, a lot of things that I think that most people, when we start to think about diversity and what diversity meant maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it was very different from that. It really opened, for me personally, it really opened up my I don't want to say my experience, but it really opened me up to a different definition of what diversity is. And I think that's really important, because diversity is not just about race. It's not just about, black versus white, as Ralph said. It really is about the broad spectrum. And so the course really gave me an opportunity to get to understand the other side or the other definition of diversity. So it was very good. Again, very emotional, very enlightening. And I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to participate in it.
Thank you very much, panelists. Before we go to the next question, is there any further input from our panelists in reference to their thought when they did receive the invitation? Any other input from our panel?
When I received the invitation, I was intrigued because I just wanted to understand how was it going to be set up? What type of conversations will we have, and would all audiences be receptive, because it is a controversial sort of title. And this was a really great exercise that the company put on for us, because it opened our minds to different perspectives of our coworkers. And what I learned was that we have more in common than we have differences, once we went through the whole entire process and we went through all the exercises. So it was a really good experience.
I would add to that, even as a panelist, that I found very impacting when we had side meetings or side meeting rooms, that you got a chance to speak with others of different races and different cultures, and where you were able to possibly develop an understanding of your colleagues that maybe they didn't have, and to be able to share, to develop sensitivity. At this standpoint, Joanna, would you take it away, please?
Sure. So during these labs, we talked about some topics that are often not discussed in the workplace. And yet there's often a natural curiosity about having these conversations and bridges that can be made. What are your thoughts on discussing these often sensitive topics in the workplace? In your opinion, do you think that they can improve our culture and our relationships?
I would like to speak on that. Thank you, Diana. I wanted to say that, I'm sorry, I wanted to say something else. When I first attended that thing, the first thing that they said was, this is a safe place. We're here to learn about topics that until now we were told we couldn't talk about in the office, but now the world is changing and Delta Dental is changing with it. These are topics that makes a lot of us uncomfortable, but myself included, but I'm willing to learn. So I wanna tell everyone that this here also, this Zoom, even though it's a smaller version, it's also a safe place, and you're gonna hear topics that maybe you're uncomfortable with. We're all vulnerable up here sharing. So this is kind of like what we're trying to do here. So hopefully you'll get something out of it like we did. So one thing that I learned, we will be breaking out into small groups, and one of my teammates in my groups, they made a really important suggestion, because we're all wondering, how can we talk about these things we were never able to talk about before? And he said, well, you can open a conversation with someone, but you can't ask just some random coworker. It has to be someone you already have a relationship with. And I'm like, that makes sense. Like, for example, at the end of I don't know if it was at the end of the lab, as they called it, they made us all write questions that we had, that we've always wondered about, but never felt safe or never felt comfortable enough to ask anyone. And a lot of the problem here is ignorance. Like, we're not comfortable asking the questions, we're never gonna learn. And one of the questions was, do you prefer to be called Black or African American? And he said, you could ask. If it's someone like you're friendly with, it's okay to ask. And I said, okay, like that was like, you would think it's like obvious, but it wasn't for a lot of us. So I really appreciated that kind of conversation. So that was just one of the many things that I learned and I wanted to. And I think it's important in the workplace to start moving towards that. So thank you.
Gio, do you think that you would feel comfortable now with someone that maybe you don't have that type of relationship with, and approaching and having that conversation?
Someone that I don't have that kind of, not someone that I don't have that kind of relationship with. I think that I would have to first build that kind of relationship with first before I can have sensitive conversations and get to know them on a more authentic level, not just workplace level.
Do you feel that having gone through, these workshops, do you feel a little bit more of a permission to have these conversations in the workplace?
A little bit more, yes. And I think with time, it would even get bigger and bigger, but yes, a little bit more.
So I'm gonna jump in on the word time that you just used, Gio. When I think about the question of can we talk about these things at work? Will it improve, our culture? I think back to when I was a kid, and the topic of homosexuality was it wasn't really a topic. It wasn't something that was talked about. It wasn't something that was comfortable at that age. Now, fast forward to an undisclosed number of years later, it's much more acceptable, and it's just like an everyday thing. Whereas years ago, it was the odd thing. And I find that if we can become comfortable at work having these conversations, the more we do, eventually it will become common, and it won't be something unusual to be talking about race, gender, whatever. So I do think, personally, I feel more comfortable, more permitted to have a conversation like that. Although I will still be a little leery of whether or not I'm going to offend somebody who I don't know very well. But I think we have the support of the organization to go down those roads, and that's the thing I'm most excited about, is the openness of everyone I've talked to so far to have these conversations.
I think it's important when when you want to have these conversations, or you want to ask what you think are difficult questions. When you look at a person, you have to be able to look at that person as not being different. You have to, come from a place of really just wanting to understand. And I think so often, because we're so used to being in our own little pockets, we tend to say people are different from us, and that kind of gives us power in our own little circle, right? Because somebody outside the circle may be different. And I think, it's important that we're talking about culture and bringing everybody together. We have to somehow stop looking at people as being different, right? Because people are people, right? And so if I want to have a conversation, or I want to ask somebody a question, it has to come from a place of really just being genuine and sincere and trying to understand, and not from a place of, well, yeah, you are really different from I am, so I can't, we're never going to be, aligned. And it's tough, especially in the workplace, because at the end of the day, we're here to work, right? But at the end, we also spend many, many, many hours together. I think because we spend so many hours together, certain walls tend to come down just because we're comfortable. We become comfortable with being around each other. But again, there's still topics that we don't approach because we, somehow put ourselves in in that closed circle of wherever it is we came from, or whoever it is that we are. I think if you're sincere and your intent is not to hurt, I think it could become easier to have those conversations at work. I do. It's going to take time. Not everybody is in the same place, but I think over time, if that's something we strive for, yeah, you can have those conversations. They can be meaningful, and then you can move on and do your work, right? So
I think the other thing that we also have to remember, and I thought it was beneficial when we went through this training, is that everyone's not going to agree on everything, and be respectful of the difference of the opinion, because if you're coming from a sincere place, there's going to be different viewpoints to a particular topic that we may not all agree with, but to respect the opposite opposing viewpoint, take the information, digest it, look at the perspective, and then you got educated on the other side of your argument, or the case that you feel strongly about. So I think respect, and just respecting each opinion, and then really taking into the information and considering other viewpoints is important as well.
Thank you. And I would add, from having participated as well, that I think when we broke out into some of those smaller groups and had some of those discussions, we actually realized that we're probably more similar than we are different if we actually just take the time to listen and understand each other and to want to know about someone. So I agree. So what part of the training was the most impactful to you?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I guess, seeing how this really impacted everybody that you work with, I thought that was extremely impactful because, unless you're really friends with somebody at work, it's not something you really discuss with everybody. So to see, what people have gone through, it was just definitely eye-opening. For instance, we had an exercise, where everybody turned on their cameras and they ask a question. And if it didn't apply to you, you'd had to turn off your camera. So whoever was left on, that situation impacted them. Just to see, like I said, what everybody's going through, as Sandra mentioned before, it got very emotional at times. It got, there were some tears that were shed from some people. There was a lot of awkward silence during the training because we shared some things that were, previously thought as being taboo. But that was brought out in the open, and rightfully so. People really shared their innermost thoughts and feelings. So, it really was, cathartic in a way, having this training and bringing it out. And like I said, you get to see and sense what everybody goes through. Because if you don't have these discussions, you get a false sense that everybody's okay and, everybody's not impacted by this. But, it really shows that these conversations do have to take place and, everybody is impacted by it.
Another thing we did was we watched short videos, several of them on different topics. And one of them was, he showed this famous rugby player who was terrified of coming out as gay to his fans that loved him so much. He didn't think they would understand because of the country that he was from. And when he finally did it and he opened himself up and he was his authentic self with the world, they loved him and cheered for him. And he was surprised. And that is so sad that he was surprised. And it just kind of shows me how I don't know other people's experiences, but I was exposed to that through this short video. Like I was able to feel like, okay, not everyone, everyone's life is slightly different. So that was just one of the many. Or another video, I'm telling you, there were several, but I'll just speak on two of them. There's a video it was called 48 Things Women Hear in a Lifetime Men Just Don't. And it showed it from little girls to grandmas telling us something that they have heard. And it could just, hearing just one of them may not sound like a big deal, but when you heard of 48 of them back to back to back, and it could be something like, oh, you're bossy, or you're tough for a girl, or just things like that. Or the N one, when it was a grandma, was, you must have been so pretty when you were younger. It's just things that people think they mean well and not realizing that they could be hurtful with the way that they impact us. So all these things show me how, as a woman, like I have heard all these things all my life, and you don't even know the impact it had on me, the negative impact it's had on me. So that's just, like I said, I could go on and on about all the things that I like, but I'll share the time.
I think that was one of the biggest things for me. As a man, there's things that I get up, get dressed, shower, and go about my day. And there's things that I never experienced. And I was just like taken aback when they played that particular video, because I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I'm like, oh my God, this is something that she may have to deal with as she travels around the world, about her appearance, or she's being self-conscious about what she's wearing or how she's perceived, or people catcalling and things like that. Like, that's something that, as a man, I've never experienced or thought about how I presented myself and just what I put on a day-to-day basis. And I was like, that was really impactful for me to get that perspective of, this is what the world is like. And it's not okay.
I would add for myself, also having been a participant, the on-off video, as Scott had mentioned, I thought was impactful and a little anxiety inducing, because you had to be vulnerable. You were going to turn your camera back on. You didn't know who else would be there having shared that same experience, or if you'd be alone. And then some of those fishbowl type questions where you were just in a group with a few people discussing. I think it took a lot of courage and vulnerability for people to share. And I think it helped us see each other differently.
Yeah, it definitely required an element of bravery to participate in that.
I wholeheartedly agree. So this program was advertised as a leadership development program with a diversity lens. Having been through these workshops, do you think it was a leadership diversity program or just a diversity training?
So I think there was definitely a leadership component because, again, as I said earlier, it kind of opened your eyes to things that you may not necessarily be mindful of on a day-to-day basis. So, I think overall the intent was to understand what inclusion really means and to, again, broaden the definition of diversity, right? So, every day we come to work, we have men on our teams, we have women on our teams, but it's more than that, and people are more than that, right? And it gave us a chance to understand, again, how to expand that, right? And when we talk about inclusion, it's everything. When you talk about people with disabilities, when you talk about, I think it was Ralph who said, you say things and you're not mindful of what you're saying, and you don't know that you're offending people. So it's really about, understanding or listening to yourself, hearing what's in your head, understanding what's coming out of your mouth, and trying to really, if you're, you think something may be so innocent, and you're not hurting anybody, but if you think about people, if you think about everybody and what their experiences may be, of course, we don't know what those experiences are, but just understanding that people have experiences that are different than yours, and not knowing what those may be, going through this course, for me, again, it gave me a chance to really understand and make a difference. So as I lead a team of people, I can't assume that one person is going to be the same as the next person because they're not the same, right? And so I have to really take a step back and choose how I approach people, how I talk to people, even if it's in a group, the things I say in a group, because you just don't know. And, when you talk about having these questions, having these conversations in the workplace, some of these conversations may get you to a point where you start to really see what those differences are. And so that it helps you to, I don't want to say treat people differently, but it helps you meet them where they are, right? And so from a leadership perspective, absolutely. I think it's an ongoing learning, right? This was not a lab where we went to this 4-day training and now we came out and we're all great and we're all, we all get it. That's really not what it's about. I think it's a journey for all of us, but I think this helped give us a boost in that direction. So I think it was both leadership and diversity and inclusion. So that was a lot of words. I hope that made sense.
Very good.
Well, I'd like to add just a little bit to that. When I first talking about leadership, I got to be honest, I fell into the trap of thinking in the context of the workshop. I fell into the trap of thinking about leadership as a title, as a position in the company. And somebody else reminded me that it's, everybody can be a leader. And I think I agree with Sandra. It's both, because it raises awareness, it educates, it informs, and it also, I believe, helps position everyone to be a leader in the area of diversity and inclusiveness. So I just wanted to call that out.
I can chime in. I wanted to say two things regarding this question. I think it's both. As a leader, if I'm taught to see the world differently as it actually is, not as I think it is, then I can bring that back to my team and make sure that I'm including everyone. So that's in that way I wanted to answer that question. I also I realized we all keep mentioning the videos, the on and off videos and how impactful they were for us, but I wanted to give everyone that wasn't part of those workshops an opportunity to hear what those questions were. Some of them, I don't remember all of them, but so they would ask questions like, all your videos were off, and they would say, were you born in a different country? And then everyone that was born in a different country will turn the videos on. And then you would look around, you say, oh, I'm not the only one. Oh, there's like 5 of us. And then you would have this feeling like of not isolation anymore, of inclusion. And I think that's what this was about, a lot of it. Or are you a close family member or part of the LGBTQ plus community? And then you will see people's videos go up and you're like, oh, I didn't know. And it was just, again, things you never really talk about it in the office. Or then they got really personal and like and vulnerable. And like Joanna has said, it was anxiety inducing. Has anyone here been sexually harassed or harassed in some way by a male or then a female, things like that. So it gave everybody an opportunity to open up. And the very last question was, did anyone not feel comfortable or not turn on the video when the question applied to them? And you will see some people that even though it's a safe place, it's going to take a lot more than one workshop to get us to be comfortable about some of these things, but it was a really good step in the right direction. I just wanted to share that because I know we've talked about these videos and just giving an idea of what these questions were.
Thank you, Gio. Anyone else from our panel?
I just want to add, and I know we had talked about this before when we were getting ready to do this this panel discussion, but when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and it and in the workplace, one thing that really kind of hit me was when we talked about it's not as difficult sometimes as we make it out to be, right? So when we think about, again, we think about it in terms of race, and we think about it in terms of Black versus white, but it really is, if you think about, you're in a meeting and, there may be people in that meeting that are not so vocal, and some of us talk all the time, and there are people that are not so vocal. It's as simple as maybe noticing somebody that's not speaking up and asking them if they have an opinion to share. And sometimes you don't know how much that means to a person. So it really is as simple as sometimes just bringing somebody into a conversation, or just asking them what their opinion is. It's not always about the things that we are constantly bombarded with in, especially in the media. It really is just about including people in whatever it is that's happening. And I think that's a really important point. And I think if we start there, it becomes, all those other things become easier to kind of, manage, deal with, talk about, whatever it is. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Sandra. Ralph, it's all yours.
Thank you. Definitely, I wanted to continue with the point of leadership. It's important for us to know that there's a difference between being a leader and being in a position. One writer states that a person emerges to be a leader. Matter of fact, I will quote Miles Monroe. He writes that leadership is the capacity to inspire others by inspiration, motivated by passion, generated by vision, produced by conviction, and ignited by a purpose. In other words, we all have the ability to be a leader, and there's a leader within all of us. So now I go to our next question. Have you made any changes in your leadership style or behaviors related to what you've learned in the program, or are you making plans to make changes?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. Being in my position, dealing with people, throughout the company, I like to think that, throughout my years, I've given everybody an equal say, an equal voice, and I'll continue to do so. I'll definitely be more cognizant of making sure I do this. As most people on this call know, I lead our company's, review the associates' compliance with our code of conduct every year. I interview approximately 1/3 of the company every year to ensure that they're compliant with the code of conduct. And part of that code of conduct is, treating other associates with respect, making sure that they're not feeling discriminated against and so forth. So, the one thing I want to make more known is that, for myself, in addition to going to your direct manager and human resources, and my door is always open. So, if you have anything to, discuss, if there's any issues, definitely bring it to my attention. I can help bring you to the right direction, talk to you and so forth. One idea that came out of our sessions that somebody brought up, which I thought was great, is having certain offices being designated as safe spaces. And those offices, denoted by having, something hanging on their doorknob or something like that, just so that, if you're facing any kind of, discrimination or issues, or you're uneasy, you have somewhere safe to go. You can always talk to somebody and, discuss the issues you might be having. So I thought that was great. And that's something that, we took offline and, possibly, hopefully can implement in the, near future.
Yeah, I definitely have made a change in my leadership style. There was a movie clip, Hidden Figures, that was played during the training sessions, and Roberta was kind of being held back by her team when she was calculating, the flight trajectories and doing the different math equations for the launch, because they didn't feel that she was ready or she was qualified. So what I have been trying to be cognizant of is not stifling anybody on my team's growth. So if they are showing interest in a particular topic, to let them go out and try and execute a task, and not hold them back and say that they're not ready to attempt to try to do something. So that's something that was impactful for me now. And I'm trying to, let them spread their wings and fly and, have new experiences and new opportunities in their careers.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that you not reduce a person to a particular characteristic. And I think that's, when we get in trouble, when you say, somebody's Black, so they're not qualified, or somebody's gay, so they really can't be part of this, or somebody's Jewish, so they can't do that. When you reduce a person to one particular characteristic, I'll just say that's when the trouble starts. And you really just have to see people for who they are, right? Regardless of those things, those characteristics, we are humans first. And we all have something to bring to the table. We all have something to offer. It may be different things, but I think it's important to start there. And I think, that, again, I know I used the word mindful, before, but it's just being mindful to not be that way. I think it's easy to be that way. Sometimes it might be comforting. It kind of makes you feel a little bit better about yourself if you can reduce somebody else. But I think as a leader, that's one of the things that I try to do, is to really make sure that I am seeing people for who they are and what they're capable of, and, responding or working that way. And so I think I'll just continue to do that. And hopefully one day I'll be there, right? One day I'll get there.
Any additional input from our panel? Well, I would definitely state that something that we found or we learned in our science classes, that there is potential energy and there's kinetic energy. And I think one of the goals of leadership is to see potential, see that energy that exists within our team, and being able to say, hey, I want to take that potential and let's make it kinetic energy, or energy that is in motion, ideas that are in motion, thoughts that are in motion. I go to our next question. Having experienced the program, would you recommend it to others? Why or why not?
I think without question, yes. yeah, I mean, at the risk of being repetitive, it was a very pleasant surprise to experience the things that we experienced. I think it's made me more aware. It's made me more educated. It's made me more sensitive. And I think it would have that. I would hope it has that same effect on everyone. And if nothing else, it at least gets everyone on the same page. It gives us all equal footing around these topics, and increases the likelihood that Delta will be a safe space for all of these types of conversations going forward. So I would say, 10 thumbs up.
Absolutely. I agree. Go ahead, Sandra.
Oh, I was just going to say 100% I would recommend this if there's an opportunity for others to participate in this. One thing that I will say, going through this, and we talked about, how it was such an emotional journey. And we, I think a couple of people talked about some of the videos that we watched, and then our discussions around, those videos. And we watched a video about, what's going on around the world, kind of, the whole Black Lives Matter and all that kind of thing. And I think for me personally, things happen in the world and things have an effect on me personally. And I come to work and I leave those things, I try to leave those things at home so that they don't impact my job. And when we talk about, or when I said earlier, people don't know what you're going through or what you're experiencing or what you're feeling, this workshop really kind of gave us an opportunity to understand that people are, I'm just going to use the word traumatized potentially in their personal lives. And then they come to work and they have to not show that. They have to not let people see that side of them. And, so during the workshop, a lot of those things, and even Scott, his comment about the person who made that comment to him about being in the oven, that's traumatic. And, you have to put that away. But if in the safe space that we were in, we got to talk about it. And people who may not know that you are traumatized in some part of your life got to see you expressing that. And it gave them a little bit more insight to you and a little bit more understanding and the ability to say, I get it now. I understand where, a certain group of people are coming from. It makes sense. And I know it's easy to say, oh, we're all the same. I don't worry about those things. That doesn't affect me. It affects all of us. On some level, it affects all of us. So this workshop really gave us the opportunity to put those things on the table, to give others the opportunity to really see you, to see what's behind you, what you bring behind you when you come into the workspace. Those things cause you to react a different way to different things. And so, it really was an opportunity to breathe, to exhale. And I hope for everybody that participated, it was an opportunity to exhale, to put those things on the table. And if there's an opportunity for others to participate, 100%, I would say 100% do it, because it's worth it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, rather than being repetitive to what Sandra and Ralph already said, I couldn't say any better myself. Absolutely recommend it. You might think, you're in tune with everything, but everybody still has a lot to learn. And I absolutely recommend it.
I would agree. I would totally, having participated, I would totally agree with recommending it, regardless of how woke you think you are. I think you'll walk away from it with some new insights, and you'll take something from having participated in it. It was truly a great experience. And this is coming from someone who, when I initially got the invite, I was like, oh, 4 days of training. How are we going to do everything? So I absolutely recommend it.
And can I just want to add one other thing that I thought was really enlightening for me? And I'm not going to call anybody out, but this person is probably going to know who I'm talking about. But during the workshop, we had an opportunity to self-identify and then get into breakout groups. So it was kind of like, if you considered yourself a person of color, you go into this group. If you considered yourself, you know, a white man, you go into this group. And so there were a bunch of groups and a bunch of ways you could identify yourself. And so people identified themselves as how they see themselves. And we got into the groups, and people were in groups that you didn't expect to be in certain groups, right? But again, it was how they identified themselves. And then when you hear the person's backstory, it just makes so much sense why somebody would identify that way. And so again, just a little light into somebody's experience can just change the world. It really does. It changes everything. And at the same time, it teaches you to not assume that you can't put people in a box. As much as we want to put people in boxes, you cannot put people in boxes, because it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. So again.
So I'll share, because I think that was me. So yeah, during the sessions, the facilitators sent a note and they said, which group do you identify with? The white women or the BIPOC? And I'll be honest, at first I was like, oh my God. And I was like, well, with the BIPOC, because growing up, I spoke another language and I spoke Portuguese, and I moved into a town that was predominantly very white, Irish, and Scottish. And so to them, I wasn't white enough. So I was always branded as being Hispanic. And that's just how I associated with. So when I was asked that question, I was like, well, I don't think I fit in the white women group. And I could tell when I joined the BIPOC group that one or two people might have been like, oh, I didn't think you would have been in this group. And then I shared my backstory.
So there you have it, everybody.
And just as this panel and what we're sharing is just a taste or a sample of our experience, just as when the discussion and dialogue is becoming even more interesting, we have to begin to shift our focus based on time. But definitely at this standpoint, I just definitely wanted to encourage our panelists and to those that are listening to begin to, or shall I say, continue to cross those barriers that will try to separate us and begin to continue to build upon this panel presentation, and just begin to continue to reach out and understand that someone may not be sensitive to what you're going through because they have not had the same experience. Joanna?
And so at the end of each of our sessions, we always closed out with the quote. So I'd like to do the same for us before we get to the question and answer portion. Quote by James Baldwin: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And I want to thank all our panelists. Sherry, Lois, I'm not sure if there are any questions.
It's Sherry, I have a few questions, and thank you. It was very enlightening and I just felt it. Thank you to the panelists.
I agree. And
yes,
before you go to the question, Sherry, just want to say, I think that last quote, Joanna, was phenomenal. Really nice job, everybody.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so I have a few questions. How do you feel being vulnerable during how did you feel feeling vulnerable during the training, and has that changed you in any way?
Well, I'll say it was difficult. And, I think, we talked about the videos, watching the different videos, and there was one particular video where a few people who really don't know me got to see me really crying my eyes out. You know, to the point where I had to turn my camera off. And I was lucky enough to attend both of the trainings, and it was the same response from me in the second training as it was in the first. And again, with people I didn't know, and it was hard, but in the end, you know, it was okay, right? Because I still come every day. I still do my job every day. I don't think anybody sees me any differently because I was vulnerable. And I think sometimes that's a fear that we have, that if people see you vulnerable, they're going to start treating you differently. I don't believe that that's happened. And, you know, it's hard, but I got through it. I got through it.
We may have touched on this, but was there one thing that surprised you more than anything else about the program? And I just wanted to say one thing. I know there are other people that participated in the program on our Zoom right now. If they want, you know, feel free to make any comments.
Okay. What was the question, Sherry?
Well, I'm sorry. Was there one thing that surprised you more than anything else about the program?
I would say that the exercise that we talked about earlier about showing yourself on camera when a particular topic applied to you, that, you know, as we as a country still have a lot to work on from a national standpoint, because people from all different walks of life, different genders, different ethnicities, different immigrant statuses have gone through a lot of the same issues. So white men, Black men, people who are homosexual had the same experiences that weren't always positive. So it's still, we are all together, but we still have work to do as a nation, that all of us come from different places and still had the same poor experiences.
Thank you, Tori. What has been the hardest takeaway?
It's a tough one.
I think the hardest takeaway is, like, when we have these discussions, we don't have all the answers, and what to do next, and how we move to that next level of community and togetherness. What does that look like? Like, no one has the definitive answers. I think that was the most kind of frustrating part for me, because we're talking about it, we're having great dialogue, but what do we do next?
I think
Sorry, this is Del. Oh, sorry. Did you guys know I attended, and it's so hard for me not to talk. I would sit here and agree with Tori. I think even at a smaller level, right? What the organization? How do we move this forward in the organization? You know, it was great. There was individuals that participated, but what are the next steps as BDNJCT that we take to ensure that we move this forward? And how do we start making these changes, even if it's small changes? But what can we do to start promoting the changes within our organization?
One of the hard takeaways for me was that just realizing that because of lack of experience in some cases, that there will be some that will not be sensitive because they did not have the experience, and that's okay. But still, you know, being able to continue to move forward, as others have already stated, still, you know, desiring to move forward in spite of those that may not be sensitive to the matters because they haven't had the experience.
I was going to say, you know, for me, it's having the patience to because not everyone has gone through this, and because not everyone is going to be as open as others, you know, the difficulty in knowing it's going to take time is what's hard for me. You know, I want it to all be perfect. I think Sandra said, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but just having the patience to get there is hard.
I know we just have a couple more minutes left, but I just wanted to read a couple of comments that came from the chat. Audra is teaching her 3-year-old daughter that every person is a new door to a different world, and God created our skin tones with beautiful variety, but all of our souls are the same color. Be kind. Thank you, Audra. And Bill Kaiser, a clear takeaway for him as a white man was the facilitator said, you don't have to abandon your privilege, just use it honorably. Are there any other questions or comments?
I
would
wanted to
just-
share
Go ahead.
real quick on the vulnerability question. I just wanted to say that I feel like that's been a theme in my life lately, in different areas. And when I hear the word vulnerability, I know that it really equals strength. And I'll say again, it took a lot of us, a lot of strength to be open and vulnerable. And I know that it makes me a better person in the end. So that's why I'm so grateful to have been part of this experience. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Gia. And I would say that change takes courage and a lot of work. And so I think all of the folks that participated in the program, I wouldn't really call it a training, I would call it more of an experience.
Right.
You know, was you know, the work that you've done to be open and to be vulnerable takes a lot of energy and a lot of courage. And we are hoping as a diversity council, we've had many programs this year, you know, and we will continue. There's going to be a second panel discussion on November 5th with another group of panelists similar to this discussion this morning that we will host again. So if you enjoyed this one, please come again. If you know of colleagues that weren't able to join this morning and you found it to be a good thing to listen to, certainly encourage them to do the same. Also, as a diversity council, we are looking to broaden the group of folks that we're able to share this experience with next year, more to come on that, but we are exploring that as well. So we hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you have an awesome weekend, day, end of the week, and be well and be safe.
If the panel can stay on after we drop off, that would be great. Thank you.
Great job, you guys.
everybody.
Thank you.
Great job,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.